Okay, so for this assignment, we're just going to be exploring InDesign some more and continuing to get more comfortable with the tools available in InDesign to assist with our layout. And we will be following some simple instructions and practicing adding margins, columns, etc. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be creating a very simple page layout based on the assignment that we have here in Canvas. And we are using a site for Black History Month from the History Channel that has a lot of content that we can use for this. Now, I am going to be using very simple content simply because I don't want to over design for this instructional video. Really, the whole point of this exercise is for you to be exploring type and how to organize it on the page, as well as how to organize the type on the page, how to explore layout using very limited parameters, and also how to edit these parameters even after you have created your document. So I'm using Black History Month from the History Channel, though this exercise may change. That just happens to be the website I'm using right now, because in the springtime this exercise happens in February, which is Black History Month. So I'm going to open up InDesign. I'm going to create a print document, letter size, and by default, the units are set to picas. Remember that in InDesign you have points, picas, inches. You actually have quite a few more, but points, picas, and inches are what we're used to. You're familiar with points, right? We've all used 12-point font. We have an idea of what that scale is. There are 72 points in 1 inch, and there are 12 picas. I'm sorry, 6 picas. I'm sorry, and my brain just froze. 6 picas. I knew that was wrong when I said 12. 6 picas in 1 inch. I'm getting my feet and inches confused with picas. Okay, so 12 points is very small. Okay, 72 points in 1 inch, and 12 picas. I'm sorry, 6 picas in 1 inch. Sorry, my math brain starts to kick in. Okay, and the reason I keep saying 12 is because picas are made of points, so they're a layout for a typographic unit that if we were comparing it to points, there would be I believe 12 points to a pica. All right, so neither here nor there. We're going to go over this, and I'm going to click create. Okay, sorry about that pause. All right, so what I have done is I have copied the text from our assignment just so that I have it right here. And page 1, I'm actually going to paste into our parent. Page 1 is going to have 2.5 margins, and I'm going to turn off these notifications right now. Okay. All right, so page 1, 2.5 margins. Okay, so right now we are not seeing that. If we take a look at this, we are going to see that it is 1/2 inch or 3 picas. Okay, so I am going to set up my margins. Let me just do this. Okay, so how to change your margins after you've already created your document is within your layout. And your layout menu is at the top of your InDesign screen in your InDesign menu. So layout, and then the second option is margins and columns. And I can set my margins 2 inches. Now I'm asking for 2.5 inches. So to type out that dimension, 2.5 IN will give you 2.5 inches, even if you're seeing picas or points here. Okay, so 2.5 IN, and when I click that, you'll see that it shifts to 15. Okay, so 2.5 IN, I'll press return, and I can also, by the way, with preview selected, I can see what that looks like. Okay, so on an 8.5 by 11, when we're talking about this, a 2.5 inch margin is going to leave only 3 inches across, because with 2.5 on each side, we get 3 inches across, and then 11.5 minus 5 is going to be 6 inches tall. Okay, and when we set these parameters, just know that that now you will apply text within this page. Okay, using these margins. And what that means is that if I wanted to add text, so I want to use my type tool and add something like a title here, I can. I can explore my typefaces. I can also explore my paragraph settings, right? So we have different kinds of paragraph settings. If we want to explore that, we can explore size, scale, all of these things, okay? So I'm going to set this to this, and you can even explore. Okay, so that's a very simple way, and I'm just gonna go in here and move these so that it's very light and it's not too much in the way. Okay, so that could be my title, and then I could determine what kind of text I want to use in other text frames. So type tool, you can set down a text frame, you can paste, and Command A will select all, and then I can go in and make changes to the typeface that I choose. Okay, I'm just gonna work with Helvetica just because that's an easy typeface to work with. I can also explore my paragraph settings. Let's turn off the hyphenation. Let's change the alignment, and we can even set it so that the text is aligned to the bottom of my text frame. And am I not pressing the right button? Oh, Shift W. Okay. We can see this page laid out with 2.5 inch margins. Now mine is not creative because I don't want to over inspire you or confuse you feeling like you have to duplicate what I've done. But you can see what happens when you have 2.5 inch margins. Now the other thing that's going on with my pages is that my page spread has some presets that have my pages facing each other. So I'm going to go to my File menu and select Document Setup, and I'm going to turn off Facing Pages. Okay, and that's going to save us a little time. Okay, so that's page 1, 2.5-inch margins. Now I would like to see you actually explore this more, really review the content of the website, handpick how you want to organize the text. I really want you to take this seriously, but again, in a tutorial video, I'm just going to make it simple so that you understand the concept without feeling inundated with too much of the designy component. Okay, so page 1 is that. And then I'm going to just duplicate this over here so we have it. You don't have to duplicate this. I'm just doing this for the video so we have a reference. So page 2 does not require any margins, and then one side of the page must have type that, quote, falls off the page. So assuming I'm using the same text as page 1, I'll move on to page 2, paste this text so I have it, and then I can determine how I want to explore it. So I'm going to use my scale tool. S is my shortcut key, and I'll just scale out. Scale is a little funny. To scale without distortion. Sorry, my dog's around here. Hold Shift and drag. That will scale the text. And then again, don't feel like you have to use this exact same typeface. You could continue to explore the different typefaces here. But what I'm going to do is continue to explore scale using my typeface scale and my scale tool, which again, outside of the text type tool, S is your scale tool. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate this so we can look at this title in a different way. So R will rotate, and the way rotation works is it has a reference point which you can find in the upper left corner of your workspace here. It looks like 9 squares. Okay, and I will rotate this so that I want it to be so that I can still read the text, but it is starting to fall off of the page. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'm going to kind of play with the fact that there are supposed to be no margins, which again, I can go to my layout and set my margins to 0 so that they're not here. And I could again explore type scale, orientation, size. Okay, it's up to you. But Shift W will give you a preview and see what's happening with the B and the H here. Those letters are falling off the page. See how they're being clipped by the page edge? And you can explore this in a lot of different ways. So that can happen. I mean, this is very organized. It's a single row frame, but you might find that you want to scale up further, or maybe it's even that you want to decrease the size here so that there's 2 rows of text. Ooh, that looks nice. So you can explore this, but I like seeing what happens when things fall off the frame, right? So I can do a Shift W again. I can press R to rotate. Now you always have to have the object selected. So R to rotate again, R. And if you hold Shift, it will lock into angles. Okay. So if we do something like this, where our text falls off the page. That one's hard to read, okay? So I love to just Shift W and see what things look like. Okay, this is a very subtle way of clipping, of having something fall off the page. And again, you can explore scale in a way that makes sense for you, right? So this paragraph, there's a little something happening here. Let's fix that. Okay, so we could change the leading, change the scale, continue to adjust this leading. Continue. You know, this is what I want to see you guys doing when you're working on your page. And then, of course, going back to your selection tool, you can use rotate, use the selection tool to move this around. S can scale up, but again, you have to hold Shift while dragging diagonally. I mean, really, Shift W will show you what's going on here. And don't feel limited, right? So if I duplicated this and moved it over, what starts to happen on the page? I mean, you can experiment, right? You can experiment with this design. And again, actually on 3 sides. So the instructions are for 1 side, but you could explore 3 sides where the text is falling off the page. So again, we're using the exact same text that was on page 1 and exploring it in page 2 with a new parameter. So page 1 had 2.5 inch margin. Page 2 does not necessarily need to have margins, but text must fall off the page. Okay, and then let's add a 3rd page. Page 3 has to be a double column page layout with 1 title line. So to create double columns, I'm going to navigate up to my layout again, my layout menu. The second option is for margins and columns. I'm going to say 2 columns, and then I can explore the gutter, which is this space in between. Again, I always have my preview selected because I really love, you know, sometimes there's nothing better than just being able to preview what the page is going to look like. And I'm also going to increase my margins to make a little more sense. Maybe a 1 inch margin. Okay. So this is a 2 column layout. We have 2 columns. I've included a gutter and I've added margins. Okay. And this one, again, I'm going to use the same text we used on page 1. Very simple. And here, what we're going to do is use this 2 column layout. I'm just going to align this text here. And I'm going to thread it by clicking on this tiny little white square that's a little bit hard to see in the lower right corner of this first text frame, and then click on the second text frame. Threading, what that does is it makes the text flow into the next frame when it runs out of space. So if I shorten this frame, you can see it fills in the next frame. Okay, now just to remain consistent, what I'm going to do is I am going to make sure that we are using the appropriate two columns. Okay, I'm gonna actually line these up and align them to the top. That's gonna make more sense. There we go. And then we have to have one title row, one title. So titles are just, I'm going to use my paragraph settings, left justify. Maybe I can do I think left justify makes more sense. So I'm going to make a title here. Again, we can always explore the typeface. And if we take a look at it, it has two columns and it has a title. Now, why would you want a page like this that has very little text? Maybe you had a beautiful photograph that's filling in this part of the frame, right? So this is the lovely thing about InDesign, is you can start to visualize what a layout or a spread might look like. So again, if we had a beautiful graphic that would be supporting whatever's being shared here, we could create a frame here that would be a placeholder for that graphic. Okay, but of course, again, I'm using very simple text because I didn't want to overdo the type being used here. But you could make changes, right? So you could be using lots of text. You do not need to be limited to the amount of text that you're using. And you can, let's just see what's going on here with our settings. I'm going to space this out a little bit because it's very hard to read. So you can add more text. I'm just using the exact same text from page 1 to page 2 to page 3 just to help you out. Okay. Now, my title is across a single column, but of course, if you wanted to, your title could even be across both columns. Okay, that's called a column spread. Okay, so that would be up to you. And I'm going to align this to the bottom again. And I could again explore scale. Okay, so now our paragraph content is across two columns. Our title is across two columns. Our paragraph content is organized by column and threads into two, but our title stretches across both. But that does not mean we're not using a two-column layout. We still have a two-column layout. So it's up to you. And again, this is just a simple layout. This page could be much more creatively used. I mean, columns can include lists. For something like this website we're using, it could have a timeline of important dates. It could have graphics, right? Feel free to add. Okay, so that's page 3. Page 4 is a 12-column page layout. So just to give you an idea of what that would look like. Don't be scared of 12 columns. 12 columns are great. It gives you a beautiful grid to work within. And the beautiful thing about 12 columns is that it can be divided by 6, 4, 3, and 2. So just to give you an idea, you could have text that spans this would be spans 5 columns. Okay, and then you could have text that spans 4 columns. actually going to have it span, yeah. Or even 2, if you wanted something like a title that follows the spine or the fold of a page. I think I duplicated something here. There we go. Okay, so your text could be something like this. And then you could even have simple graphics. Okay, so again, the idea behind a 12-column layout is not that you have to use 12 columns exactly, but the idea is that it gives you a more viable grid that offers a lot of flexibility. So let's say it makes sense for me to have a list here and then have related graphics organized here. Well, I can do that with a 12-column grid, right? So don't feel as though you can't do that as well, right? So this can become a really interesting page layout if you think about it. So any one of these frames could be text, could be graphics, okay? So again, if we just wanted to, let's say we're sticking to this little bit of a haphazard layout, but let's just say we are going to use the same text as page 1. Let's bring this in here and paste it. What I would do is I would copy this this text here, and within my type tool I would actually I would just rotate this. I'd hold shift and rotate it, place it inside of this frame, and scale this text frame to fit this frame here that we have. And again, just as before, explore scale. We probably want our paragraph settings to sit the bottom of my frame. So I'm going to align this to the top. Okay. Okay, so this frame fits right there, right within the grid. Again, I'm just locking this frame into the grid. This text here can fit into this grid, or this, I should say, frame that I've set up here. So I'll just remove that. Have this. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing my frame. I think I grabbed the wrong edge. Okay. And then we could add something like a timeline or graphics to these other areas. Maybe some more supplements, maybe a profile could fit inside of this. But Shift W will give you an idea of how a 12-column page layout could look. Okay, this is just, again, just a very quick example where we are using these columns, and again, they give you so much flexibility when you get to 12, because you can do a 2-column, that's across the 6 columns. You can do a 3-column, a 4-column, a 6-column layout. It's very flexible, and it does give you a very beautiful grid. Okay, so that is page 4. Page 5 is going to have 1/2-inch margins with 1/4 inch gutters for columns. So I'm going to go to my layout menu again, margins. Again, if you're not sure about picas to inches, 0.5 IN will give you the inches. My units are currently set to picas because that's how I set my units at the beginning, which is 3 picas. Now, for page 5, I'm letting you select the number of columns you want. So I don't care how many columns you have, but you're going to want 0.25 inch gutters. Okay? So just an FYI, that's what you're going to want. Put one, so for picas, that's 1 P6, but again, you can do 0.25 IN 4 inches. All right. And again, explore the page layout. Use this column layout creatively, just like we had the 12 column layout, and I showed you how you can kind of creatively stretch the use of these columns. Don't feel that everything has to fit into a single column. Consider using one column. Consider using a frame that stretches across 2 columns. Think about something that stretches across all 4, but make it obvious that you do have 4 columns here that you're working with, and use the gutters as the space in between. Okay, same for page 6. It's going to be very similar. We're going to go to our margins and column settings. Here we are going to have the same 1/2 inch margin, but this time we are going to have 1/2 inch gutters. So 3P for the number of gutters. So see, when we look at this preview with a 1/2 inch gutter, there's a lot more space here than if we go to 1/4 inch gutters. Okay, it's going to shift the way you think about this space, because this is actually a lot of white space in between any column. Okay, so that's how they're different. You see how the gutters shift. Okay, so I trust that you are going to be able to do this. Remember, you can set some of these settings when you create your first document, but you'll probably want to go page by page, setting your margins and columns. And remember that if you need to turn off your facing pages, which will give you the 2-page spread, you can go down to Document Setup under File, and you can turn off facing pages. Okay, so by default, this is probably selected. So you want to deselect facing pages so that you just get 1 page at a time. Okay, I'm not going to design 5 and 6 for you, because I think after those 4 pages, you probably have a good idea of what to do with this assignment. Once you're done, export as a PDF, use a high quality print, and submit. And remember, whatever website I've assigned, it's probably because it's related to current events. So even though I use Black History Month, you might be using a different website. It might change because I change these exercises a little bit even after I make my recordings. So I hope this helps, and I hope this gives you some creative ideas about how you can begin exploring layout and how you can use a grid as an invisible tool, right? So as an invisible tool to create your page layout. So even though I don't see the grid in my final layout here, I know as a designer I used a grid to give me some structure so that I could experiment more. So in some ways, having that grid, having that given structure allows me to actually further experiment with my layout while creating legibility and a solid structure. It's like architecture, right? You need that solid frame before you start adding all the other stuff. And that's really what these grids are for. Okay? All right, I hope that helps.